Okay, it's live now.
Good morning, everybody. This is Seamus Jefferson, Director of CONCORD, here in the office in Brussels, Square Amburix, and welcome to everybody listening in live. And we shall also be recording this webinar for later viewing. And it's an opportunity for us to talk to and hear from and ask questions of the one person who has been nominated for the post of the presidency of CONCORD. So that decision will be made next week at the General Assembly. And Johannes Trimmel is joining us from Vienna. And I will ask him a couple of questions. And then all of you listening or watching can also ask questions. And you can do that through the text box just below the screen that you should be watching this webinar on the Concord net, and you can text us a question and we can ask Johannes. As I say, we'll be recording this webinar so people can watch it later, people that can't join us. And just before we get underway, I also want to point out that for the candidates for the Concord board, they have also recorded a message, a motivation message, which you can also view on CONCORDnet. And that's in the top right-hand corner of the screen on which this webinar is taking place. So without any more ado, I'm going to ask Johannes Trimmel, who's a board member who works for Light for the World NGO and is involved in the Austrian National Platform, to introduce himself. And Johannes, if I can also ask you to start off by telling us what you think are the main challenges and opportunities facing the European NGO sector and CONCORD in the coming years. Over to you, Johannes.
Yeah, thank you, Seamus. Actually, I have to say I only heard half of what you said because the connection somehow was a bit disconnected. So excuse if I'm repeating some things that you have said. Well, actually, starting maybe with the challenges and opportunities for CONCORD and the NGO sector in Europe. Look, just secular. I think the enormous
Okay, Johannes, you're breaking up a little bit there. We can't hear you very well. Okay, the connection's not very good there. I'm wondering, do you want to stop and try the connection again, or do you want to try to get Johannes on the phone? Or
the general situation in Europe, that even in that situation there is a split between European member states and not a clear common political response, and one has the feeling that it's rather working on a minimum agreements than looking forward to solutions or to actions which can really have an impact. The other event, of course, was the European elections last Sunday, and to me, it's not only the shift to protest and to the right wing political parties, especially in some countries, but to me it's even more important to look at how low are the participation in countries. It's 13%, in elections at the European level. Kind of
Okay, sound's breaking up a little bit there, Johannes. I don't know whether you can hear me. The sound's breaking up a bit there. So Johannes, we didn't hear all of that.
Engage in civil society and other initiatives.
Okay, better now.
No.
Yeah. I think it's going to be better if we carry on the phone.
If he can mute, like that we can see him and he can speak by phone. Okay? That,
yeah,
that
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all of you listening out there, what we're going to do is we're going to try to change this. We have a very bad connection with Johannes, who's in Vienna. We're here in Brussels. What we're going to try is to just get Johannes on the phone, so we won't be able to see him. We'll just be able to hear him. Okay, we're going to try one last time.
But what I mean is, like, if he can go to the triangle in behind to the camera and to down the quality of the image, that will. Okay,
Johannes, can you hear? Sorry, telling you there.
Turn on the video of Johannes. Like that, we can listen him. Yeah. It's a easier thing. Turn out of the video.
Yeah, Johannes Heitzang here. You could maybe take off the webcam and just use sound, and that way the connection could be faster.
Y baja tu la calidad nuestra. No.
He's just trying it now.
Yeah. Okay, Johannes, keep talking so we can see whether we can hear you. We can see a still photo. Okay.
We'll call him on this.
Should we go to telephone?
Yeah.
Okay, Johannes, I think what we're going to try and do is get you on the phone, and then we'll have your voice coming out here of the spider in the middle of the table. And we won't be able to see you, but we think your words on this occasion are more important than your picture, if I may say so.
Yes, you may. Okay, I will stop here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to... Okay.
Mute the...
Yeah. Okay, Johannes, right, we can hear you now. So Johannes, so I'm really sorry to make you sort of start again a little bit, but just because I think we didn't hear you very well, so I think the question was, what do you think are the main challenges and opportunities facing CONCORD in the years to come?
Okay, I will try to make a kind of briefer summary. In essence, what I tried to say is that I think that the biggest challenge for CONCORD and civil society in general is really the lack of political leadership in the European Union and in Europe, and I think it's manifested in a couple of things that we have experienced in the last month. So thinking about all the developments in the Ukraine, next door to the European Union, which is already kind of somehow also having an impact on some of the EU member states, that the European political leaders are failing to really get together to a strong common response, and cannot really bridge the differences between perceptions in member states is quite disturbing. So, because the question for me is, if in such an external crisis it's not possible to come to a common solution-seeking response, then what happens with decisions that need to be taken on a day-to-day basis? And I think now the European elections have also shown us not only a kind of stronger vote for right-wing parties, especially in some European Union member states, but even more has shown with all the discussions now on the future Commission President and the potential horse trading that's going around the high positions in the European Union, that there is really a lack of strong political leaders, and this leads to me quite visibly to disengagement and dissolution of European citizens. And we have countries like Slovakia where participation in the elections was just 13% and so on. And for me, disengagement and dissolution of citizens will not only affect the political leadership, but it will definitely also affect the readiness and the motivation for European citizens to kind of stay engaged with civil society and stay engaged in processes to really kind of in a participatory way discuss and dialogue about the society we want, and to actively engage in processes or demand engagement. And I think for CONCORD, this is a key issue on how we will be able in the coming years to kind of engage civil society in a way that they and citizens in a way that they feel that there's really an opportunity and a chance to kind of move things and move an agenda, and to hold also political leaders accountable and demand really a dramatic change on the side on how dialogues, discussions, and decisions are taken at this moment.
Thanks very much, Johannes. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be president of CONCORD?
Well, I myself, I'm engaged in development cooperation for the last 20 years, working in different NGOs in Austria, and now for the last 3 years in a role that's not, well, that's on a European or confederation level across a couple of countries in Europe. And actually what really always motivated me to work in this area are the experiences and the kind of get-togethers with people in developing countries. So when visiting a village and meeting a family who has the paper on the land right in their box, so that they are owners of the land, but at the same time, because of the social and economic situation, they are still obliged by a landlord to do bonded labor on their own ground. This kind of injustice kind of motivated me, or seeing people who are really denied the basic access to education, to health, to dignity, knowing that some people cannot go to a health center because we simply do not have the means for transport in a bus and so on. And I think this kind of realities with which I have been confronted many times is kind of really the driver for me to engage. And I would also say I recently realized over the last years that the question of poverty, of social exclusion, of marginalization, of inequalities is not a question that's only one for people in developing countries, but it's really a global issue. If we want to change something here, it's not development cooperation only that will change things. It's not us only that need to work on it. It's really a kind of broad coalition needed, which fights the structures and the systems behind which allow still 400 million people who have no equal access to basic human rights and who cannot equally participate in forming societies.
Thanks, Johannes. I've got a question from Martin Korchens from the DEEP project.
Yeah.
And he asks, should CONCORD work towards aid independence of the South, or do you see overseas development assistance as a structural part of global development? Thank you, Martin, for the question. Johannes.
Well, a brief response from my side. I definitely believe that overseas development aid is not the, let's say, the recipe to end global poverty and to bring and sustainable change alone. On the other side, I also believe that for a couple of countries, for many situations, and especially if we want to really reach the kind of poorest groups, official development assistance can play a transformative and very important role. And the question for me is how we can kind of rebuild and restructure official development assistance that it really fulfills that purpose of reaching the poorest as a kind of social transfer, which otherwise left out. And it's quite interesting. There's one on kind of some of the universities working on collecting evidence on whether development cooperation is reaching the poor people. And from the last thing I came across was a kind of study in West Africa, and it clearly showed that the traditional development assistance reached to middle income and lower income, but definitely not the poorest, because very often there are many social mechanisms in place which kind of limit their access to support. So to say ODA is, I don't think that it's a concept that's wrong or should be changed, should be kind of abolished completely, but it should be clearly redirected to play an effective role where it can play an effective role.
Thanks, Johannes. Let me ask you another question. What do you think are the challenges facing CONCORD as a confederation and as a network?
I would say one challenge is I would say if we look at the membership across CONCORD, there are quite some members who do not find it easy to kind of manage their day-to-day work and to find the sufficient resources in doing the work they want to do and they need to do. And I think this is definitely a threat, because then also the capacity to engage in a joint European confederation and network might be limited, and it's very often kind of a very understandable tendency then to say, okay, we first need to focus on our own also survival before we can proactively and progressively engage in federation. And so my question here would be, how can we explore also kind of support of members within CONCORD, so that that members who are more struggling for various reasons can get support from other members, and really kind of also see the usefulness of the confederation in helping them to develop. So that I think is one challenge. The other challenge and the consideration, I would say, it's more the external side to it. I think CONCORD has been very successful in building up a reputation as being a political voice, and this also means to strongly believe and confidently speak out with an independent voice. And there is, I at least think there is a tendency from external stakeholders to kind of try to get CONCORD and other civil society organizations and networks more becoming part of the system, and there are different ways to move in that direction. And I think the question of what are the conditions to access funding as a consideration is one of them. So dependency or independency for me is also a challenge that I see ahead for CONCORD, and how to maintain in the current institutional setting a really strong independent voice and feel confident in really kind of bring up issues and talk straightforward points we want to make.
Great. Johannes, what are the strengths of CONCORD?
Well, the strength of CONCORD is, of course, a very, very diverse and active membership across Europe. And I think if we look at the participation of CONCORD members over the last years, we can see that, and we see that there is more and more engagement. I also want to kind of remind us of the CONCORD political narrative process, which brought in many, many voices into a joint debate, which I think is absolutely great and is something we can build on, also to show how we can involve our membership, or how you can involve in general diverse voices in a debate that leads to a kind of clear statement. I think the other strength is that from an organizational point of view, that we have managed over the last 10 years really to get a very good, let's say, institutional setting for CONCORD, where it's clear what the network can do, what it does not can, and what is the role of the secretariat, what is the role of the governance structures, and what is the roles of the members and members of the members. Mm-hmm. I think at the moment we have a very healthy institutional or structural setup in which there's a lot of trust and positive kind of energy to move things, and that's definitely a strength which I think we have to be very careful to keep that, because the moment trust within CONCORD is would be lost, it would be very hard to kind of stay on with being a strong voice externally.
Thanks very much for that, Johannes. I've got another question for you from Janek. Thanks very much, Janek, from the Polish National Platform in Warsaw. And the question for you, Johannes, is the following. Regarding the results of the European Parliament elections, do you believe that CONCORD should reach out to the part of EU society that voted for eurosceptic parties?
Yeah, very interesting question, in which I have also been always involved in Austria, where you also know that they have quite a strong eurosceptic and right-wing vote party and voters. I think there's possibly one needs to kind of draw a line somewhere. So I definitely think we should not engage and dialogue with people, with politicians who are kind of really kind of completely contradicting our values, human rights, our basic positions, and are really kind of like fascist or neo-fascist kind of setting. When it comes to, let's say, legislative processes, and we have a call to make, we have to voice an issue, then I think this should be a call that should go out to everybody, whether they like to hear it or not. And let me say a third thing, it definitely does not mean that we shouldn't engage with people who have voted for eurosceptic or for Russian. I think citizen engagement is important, and there are many motives for people to vote for such parties, and we should not kind of just put them all in one corner and say we're not talking to.
Great, thanks very much for that. Sounded like there was an earthquake in Brussels, but it's not. They're digging up the road here in Square Ambiorix, so there was a shuddering and vibration. But we're all still here, you'll be happy to hear. And we're joined by between 11 and 15 viewers coming in and out from different parts of the Confederation. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining us. I hope the sound is clear, even though, unfortunately, we're unable to see Johannes. We'll have to post a picture of him. He's joining us from Vienna, and we're about 20 minutes into this webinar, which is asking Johannes, as the candidate for CONCORD presidency, a little bit about how he sees the challenges ahead for CONCORD, how he sees what CONCORD has to offer, his own background, and what he has to offer. Just remind everybody that this will be recorded and posted on the CONCORD net, so people that weren't able to tune in this morning can also hear, Johannes, what you have to say. Johannes, I want to move on to another question, which is a little bit about the role of the governance structure of CONCORD, the board, and particularly the post of president of CONCORD. You've been on the board of CONCORD for a number of years. How do you see the role of the president and of the board of CONCORD?
Well, I think in general there are different functions that I see for the board, and the one is the more kind of straightforward role in kind of managing the Confederation as an organization, and these are things when you have to discuss finance, let's say finances or office things, or kind of a couple of such things which are necessary to keep an organization going. The more, or the equally, or maybe more important role that I see for the board to play is really to try between the General Assemblies to keep the strategy in place and to steer the CONCORD working structures to implement or to work towards the common agreed strategy and annual priorities and so on. Having said this for me is not really kind of just technical thing or monitoring role. It's also important in that work to sense what is going on internally and externally. And I think there are so many fast developments taking place that to kind of continue to progress towards our vision and mission and envisaged kind of key success points and achievements means constantly also bit adaptation here and there. And I think the board plays an important role in that. And for that, it's also so important that the CONCORD board really shows the diversity of the CONCORD Confederation in general, because only the diversity guarantees that you really do not lose out on important aspects and elements of what is happening internally and externally. And I think as president, the last two very great presidents, Justin and China, have very much shown that president always has an internal role and an external role. And I think the internal role is really to kind of be the person that kind of takes up issues as they come, which are important for the Confederation functioning and development, and tries to build opinions and consensus, not only on the board but also in the broader CONCORD membership on how to grow and how to develop further the Confederation. And of course there's an external role also, which is to present CONCORD positions and convictions to an external audience. So I have to say that for the external role, I think we're on the way, and that is something I would also promote, is to have more and more European leaders also taking up an external role in representing CONCORD. We have so many really great people and great inspirational persons in the network, and I would like to see more of them being actively engaged and speaking out on behalf of CONCORD.
Great. Thanks very much, Johannes. There's another question from Rebecca from the Trilogue Project. So the question is, how would you, as CONCORD President, propose to ensure CONCORD work engages and reflects the realities of all CONCORD members, from strong international networks to small national platforms that lack resources? Do you want me to read that again, Johannes?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
Well, this is, as I said before, this is definitely one of the challenges that CONCORD as a network has. And there might not be so easy, straightforward answers. But one thing that for me is an important element here is that members among them understand and know the different realities. And I think, because I think if you know more from each other and your realities, the challenges that several members face, and I think each member has its own challenges and difficulties and opportunities, but the more we know them, the easier it is in situations to kind of find solutions which have a positive impact on the broad membership. And maybe we need to create spaces also to kind of to allow for knowing each other better. And I think there are some ideas already around this. The other thing that I believe we have taken up and should increase is really also for members of the board, of the secretariat, of working structures of CONCORD to meet members and to find more out about what are the discussions and the debates there. And I think when looking back in last year, when board and management team member kind of visited more than 25, I think, CONCORD members, and the feedback we have got was very inspirational, actually, on what all is happening at members level of very different sizes and histories and situations. And I think this is also an important element in this. And the third, and that's what I'm thinking of, and that's probably the most difficult one, is I think we need to sometimes shift a bit our perspective. So very often we think about, well, that's happening on the European level, and how we get our members to engage in that, and ask members for engagement in a number of issues and processes. But we do not so often go back and ask members, well, what are the issues with which you are struggling in your network or in your national platform, and is there something that CONCORD as a network can do to help in this? And I think this kind of reverse side of interaction can be strengthened. And actually, I hope that the idea of CONCORD engagement strategies of members, that would really be an opportunity to kind of find ways to kind of really work in this diversity of members and include equally stronger and maybe more struggling CONCORD members.
Thanks for that, Johannes. I want to ask, I mean, from my point of view, a last question, unless there are others from other people. So I'm going to ask you a last question. I'm going to see whether there are any other questions coming in. Then I'm going to make a brave attempt to summarize some of your main points, if you'll allow me, and then I'm going to leave you the floor at the end. Okay?
Yeah.
So I can't remember what sequence that was. Right, okay. My question was, in the next year, what are the big priorities we've got over the next year? I mean, we know our annual priorities and so on, but how do you see our key pieces of work that are sort of on the table over the next 12 months?
Well, the one thing is very obvious, and that is the dialogue and discussion with the European institutions after the elections. So our work with the new Parliament, our work with the European Commission in the various portfolio areas, and I think that will need and take some of our resources, definitely. And I see that also a big chance, because we have the Europe we want calls, we have the summary areas or the four main areas from our political narrative, and I think when we can start from this should allow us to really get from the start in a political dialogue with parliamentarians, with commissioners, and other political leaders in Europe, so that we kind of don't fall in the trap to kind of start again just working on policies, which is also very important, but really use the momentum to transmit our political narrative. So that's one. The other thing that I would see as a priority for next year is internally to continue to work on participation of the CONCORD membership, on developing leadership, on strengthening the network itself, including the reach out to other social movements and networks. I believe this becomes more and more critical to really be able to bring a different agenda on the political landscape. And finally, which is also quite obvious, we are working on a new CONCORD strategy from 2016 onwards, and I would very much like to use that process or to kind of organize the process really in a way that allows for broad participation, to get many voices on board, to get also external voices on board who have their views and opinions on how Europe and the world is developing, so that in a broad consultative process, we're arriving at a strategy that's really owned by CONCORD members and members of members. So I would like members of CONCORD really to know the CONCORD strategy, to be part of the process, and then also be committed to really kind of be part of delivering on the strategy.
Great. Thanks very much, Johannes. Let me have a go at trying to summarise some of the main points you've made. So I think at the beginning you were tackling the issue of how you see the main challenges ahead, and I think you tackled that looking more broadly the situation in Europe and a lack of critical leadership, lack of engagement with the public and with citizens, and the need to engage civil society in processes in Europe. In answer to a question from Martin about the role of overseas development assistance, is that something that the South can become, quotes, independent of, or is that a fixed feature, if you like, of the development landscape? I think you were saying that there's certainly a need to update our whole outlook on how we're dealing with overseas development assistance in the broader context of our sector of development and of global solidarity. I think you addressed issues about challenges that we face in CONCORD, and one of those was certainly on members, how members that perhaps lack the resources to engage fully on the European level can be supported, both by other members and also supported to see the benefits for them of work within the wider confederation. In terms of external challenges for CONCORD, one that you mentioned was about dependency and independency vis-à-vis the European institutions and the importance of remaining independent and a strong independent voice, albeit as an interlocutor on development and development-related issues excuse me, with the European institutions. In terms of CONCORD's strengths, you spoke about CONCORD having a very diverse and a very active membership, and you cited all the work on the political narrative as evidence of this, that there was very strong debate, that very diverse voices were able to be accommodated, and that this is a process that really needs to be built on. Another strength was the overall governance structure and the sort of constellation of the governance structures and working structures of CONCORD, the working groups, the members of members, and so on. And you feel there's sort of a great reservoir of trust there that needs to be developed and built on, because once that is lost, that's very difficult to re-establish. You spoke a little bit about the role of the presidency and the board. One of the roles of the presidency and the board is to manage the organisation of the confederation, including the finances and so on, to keep the strategy in place and rolling, and to guide the working structures and the working processes to work towards the priorities outlined by the governance of CONCORD. A role of the board was to analyse the context internally and externally of CONCORD's work, and to make sure that filters down through to the confederation. To talk about the external role. So the CONCORD board and presidency has an internal and an external role. And I think in terms of external role, it's obviously the role of the president and the board to represent CONCORD and our constituency to external actors. And then you spoke about the need to ensure that the various leaders of CONCORD at different levels were also promoted to speak on behalf of the confederation, and the need to take steps to push the different leaders, of which there are many, to take up their role in representing the confederation. You spoke about the need to know members better when looking at the different, the diverse membership from very strong, quite well-resourced network organisations to smaller national platforms. And then you said that if we know our members better, we can make better decisions. and that it would be good to make or develop spaces for us to get to know each other better in the Confederation. And I think that you mentioned a lot of the visits that were made last year by the President and by the Board, about visits to about 25 member countries. And that helps us shift our perspective a little bit from not only looking about the world from the European level, but also the contexts of the different members and national platforms, and to see what perhaps Concord can do for them. In terms of our sort of more immediate priorities, you spoke about the need to engage the leadership or the new leadership of the EU institutions, the Parliament, the institutions, the Parliament of the Commission, and part of that was to develop or introduce, if you like, our political narrative that we've been having, to the new leadership in the Parliament and the Commission. And then you spoke about a key priority being participation of the membership. How do we develop leadership? How do we build on the network? How do we reach out, also in this context, how do we reach out to other movements within European and Southern civil society? And then a final word on the new strategy that we're developing. You spoke about the need to ensure that all members and also the members of the Concord membership felt part of the decision on the new strategy and felt part of promoting that. So I hope I've summarised some of your main points, Johannes. Do you want to make any final points or remarks before I wind it up?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the great summary, which I think is really a good and fair summary of the points that I've made. Maybe just 2 or 3 sentences as final remarks. I think the day-to-day experience of so many people who are facing exclusion, poverty, and inequalities is really what motivates me and what motivates us in our work. And I'm sometimes really kind of disappointed on how fast kind of these realities are turned into political phrases and cold wording when it comes to institutions and governments and so on. And I don't know how to deal with this, but it's really strange that sometimes you feel it's awkward. You talk about even poverty and exclusion and inclusive development because it's all kind of built into documents and position papers and official statements already. And if I remember correctly, in the kind of Concord political narrative process, we were talking also about storytelling and telling what we want to say in a different way. And I believe that's something we need and I need and I also want to take up to kind of get into a kind of situation where we tell stories and let people tell their stories in a way that they're really reaching beyond policy formulations. And this probably is one key issue if we really want to connect local and global solidarity and build our relations with citizens' movements, and also for the alliance building 3 of the areas we have identified in the narrative process.
Great, thanks very much, Johannes, for those final words. And let me just wrap it up by saying that although we didn't have a debate because you were the one candidate for the presidency, I think we felt it was really important to have the opportunity for you to express yourself and say a little bit about who you are and your vision, and also your thoughts about the context that we're facing in Concord and the challenges, and I think you've expressed yourself, if I may say so from my point of view, extremely well and clearly, and I think that's given people an opportunity to get to know you better, and I think that's been very, very important. I'd like to really thank the viewers for sticking with it. We're using technology more and more. It's not easy, but I really want to thank the colleagues here in the Secretariat as well for trying to get us to communicate more and better and more efficiently with members that are spread across Europe. I think one of our big challenges is a perceived lack of balance between those of us based in Brussels and those based across Europe. And I think we just need to stick at it and keep going with the technology so that people can tune in and feel involved. So we'll be doing that. And I really thank everybody for tuning in. And welcome your comments and feedback. That's really important. Let us know how it went, how we can make things easier for you, so we can carry on these processes. And just a final sort of plug for the CONCORD.net page, where there are video presentations from the candidates that are standing for the board at the General Assembly next week. So unless there's any other comments or thoughts from my colleagues, I want to thank you all very, very much and look forward to seeing you at the General Assembly. For those of you that are interested, in about 1 hour's time, we're going to be back on the TV here in Brussels for, I think, a very interesting debate and question and answer session on the results of the European Parliament elections, what it means for Europe, and in particular, what it means for our sector and for CONCORD. So we've got some sort of experts here in the studio, and we're also really looking forward to hearing from different voices and perspectives and questions from around Europe, around the Confederation. So I hope you can join us for that. And in the meantime, it's goodbye from me and from us. Thank you. Thanks, Johannes. Goodbye from you as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thanks, Johannes. Bye-bye.
Bye.